Folks have been discussing recently the state of the Planetside 2 metagame, or rather the lack thereof. The majority of the debaters, however, seem to be focusing on the strategic side of the game, the lack of objectives. There's another angle, however, that I feel is not being talked about enough, and that's the tactical side of the metagame. Now, what does metagame mean? Doesn't really matter what it means, honestly. Nobel gave as good a definition as any. What players want is lasting, fulfilling battles, where it feels as though their input has an impact, like what they are doing is making a difference. The primary reason that Planetside 2 has trouble doing this is zerging. Now let's talk about what a zerg is. A zerg is a big horde of attackers who have sufficient number that the defenders cannot mount a defense. Anyone who shows up will simply be slaughtered. This is not fun to fight with or against. I often hear people ask, why don't more people show up to defend? The answer is because you can't defend. If you show up to defend, you are wasting your time. The counter to zerging, as it stands, is zerging. You make your own zerg. You then go and take your zerg, and you go and attack places where you have sufficient numbers that the defenders cannot mount a defense, etc., etc. Your zerg and the enemy zerg then begin to dance around each other, playing musical chairs, always attacking, never defending, never confronting. Other threads have pointed out that there isn't a whole lot else to do, other than attack constantly. There's a serious lack of strategic level objectives. This is absolutely true. However, there's another side to this problem. The game also does not let you do anything other than attack. There's a serious lack of ability in Planetside 2 to be tactical. Now, to boil this problem down even further, the problem lies in asymmetrical battles. Planetside 2 handles asymmetrical battles very poorly. Player skill and organization have very little effect on the battlefield. Now, I'm sure what I just said is going to be very controversial. People are going to come out in defense of organization. They're going to cite how organized their outfit is and how successful they are. Please don't misunderstand me. Outfits can and they do organize in positive ways. This is in fact the entire reason I play the game. However, at the end of the day, numbers win. The amount of players being fielded massively outweighs their skills or their coordination. Battles become purely a numbers game. Because of this, all fights sooner or later devolve into zerging. Chess turns into checkers. Giving Planetside 2 an interesting metagame will require more than objectives. It will require empowering players to complete those objectives. Planetside 2 must become a game more skillful, more tactical, more competitive. Outfits, squads, and even mere players must be given the power to change the battlefield through feat of arms. Now let's talk about the specific issues. The major roadblocks that are preventing Planetside 2 from being a more tactical game. Now, there's tons of little issues that all harm the tactical side in some way or another. Tons of little things that make the gameplay a little bit more cheesy. If I was to just list everything that came off the top of my head right now, we'd be here all night. So for the sake of time, I will go over what are, in my opinion, the three biggest issues and offer a possible solution for each. Issue number 1. Spawning. Spawn points emit massive pressure in Planetside 2. Downed enemies can return to where they were killed in mere moments. Sunders give the attacker a massive advantage. Sunders are faster spawning points than hard spawns. This means that the attackers are encouraged to make use of their spawning advantage by suicidally charging. Faced with this situation, the defenders have only one choice: to use gamey suicide tactics to destroy enemy Sunders. Tactics such as charging with tank mines. All around, the player is encouraged to be charging everywhere. This leaves combat, especially in close proximity to spawn points, Too chaotic for there to be any small arms tactics. Now for a solution. Dynamic spawn timers. Your spawn time becomes based on the recent frequency of your death. This means that dying more often immediately after spawning makes your timer longer. Conversely, going longer without dying makes your timer shorter. Now what this will do is give the more coordinated side a big spawning advantage. Being revived will suddenly become much more important. Players will be rewarded for moving around with groups rather than piecemeal, because groups will be able to revive each other and cover each other. Small arms tactics will become much more important to win. A few other spawning changes. Sunders should have their timer brought in line with facilities. Being able to be placed anywhere is more than enough advantage. Furthermore, warp gates should allow instant spawning. Warp gates serve as an important rallying point for squads and outfits. Issue number 2. Grenades and explosives. Grenades have an unhealthy effect on gameplay. They were clearly not designed with the scale of the game in mind. Grenades have turned biolab fights into hot potato matches, where the player spends all of his time dodging grenades, throwing his own. Grenades, one would think, are a tool for breaching rooms, flushing enemies from cover. However, grenades make such tactics unneeded, as they, generally speaking, outright kill the enemy altogether. Grenades and explosives are simply too lethal. They become the ends rather than the means. A grenade should deal no more than 70% damage to an infantryman. If grenades were brought down to this level, they would still see heavy use, but it would become necessary to use them in a much more tactical and thoughtful way to launch the assault rather than complete it. Non-explosive grenades should become far, far cheaper. Their use should become encouraged. Currently they cost as much as 3 explosive grenades, which is frankly ridiculous. Explosives in general need a lot of tweaks, but adjusting grenades would be a good start. This would go a long way towards allowing squads of infantry to work in close proximity. Issue number 3. Base design. This one is a doozy. It's hard to prescribe solutions to this. Solutions could potentially take a lot of development time. Thankfully, the developers seem to be working on this. We'll have to wait and see how the January patch turns out. But I do want to talk for a moment about what is specifically wrong with the base design, and not just the part that everybody agrees about, that current base design encourages spawn camping. Everyone agrees that that part has to change. Current base designs have bad map flow. Battlefields are chaotic. Everyone is everywhere. Enemies and allies do not come from predictable directions. This means that realistically, there's very little room to plan. There's very little room for small arms tactics and close coordination between individuals, because everything is far too chaotic for that. Enemies can come from every direction. There's no real choke points in the game. The only real choke points are spawn rooms. Since that's the only reliable choke point in the game, very predictably, that's where everyone's gone to camp. Choke points, I'm sure you're going to say, favor the defenders. Absolutely not true. Choke points favor who has the coordination to take advantage of them. They just as quickly become liabilities to the defenders. It is important for the map design to have some kind of predictability, because when you have that, the players can start to think tactically. They can say to themselves, okay, there's 5 guys in the house. We have 4 in our squad. If we throw a flashbang in, clear 2 left, clear 2 right, we might win despite the odds. As it stands, one simply walks around the house until he finds which one of the many entrances is not being watched. In a few cases, a few quick fixes could dramatically improve the flow of the map. Tower battles, for example, could be improved by simply filling in a wall here. The maps aren't entirely a lost cause, but serious change is needed. It's a good idea to start small. Now let's talk about moving forward. Beyond merely fixing problems, what can we add? How can we empower individual players and organize squads? How can we make the game have more depth without making it needlessly more complex? Here's my idea. Class mixing. Simply put, giving players the ability to bring a tool or ability from another class. Obviously, this wouldn't be without limits. Everyone won't have everything all at once. There'd be some sort of trade-off. The point, however, is to give players the choice to make that trade-off. But if they want, they could be an infiltrator and stealthily revive their teammates. Or our organized squad could have everyone carry engineer turrets and lay them as barricades. Your imagination is the limit. This would make both players and small squads more versatile. This would simultaneously allow more room for players and outfits to develop their own unique styles. By giving the player more customization, they can invent their own solutions to what seem like unbeatable situations. Small squads will be able to coordinate their kits and not be forced to have a large group to bring everything they need to have. Players will be encouraged to stand up to odds that seem against them, because skilled and organized players will have tools to fight back. And the best part about this idea is that it's easy. All of these things are already in the game. There's nothing outright new to design or code in. This means that there also isn't a crazy amount of new tools for players to learn about, but at the same time, the depth of the game is massively increased. The current class system leaves a great deal to be desired. The amount of true customization is sad. It's less than in almost any recent shooter. And having run many small squads before, I almost find no reason to have anyone play something besides heavy assault. Everyone can heal themselves with medkits, and they can redeploy when out of ammo, which is compounded by the spawning issue. 10 players, 10 heavy assaults. If we need to repair something, then we bring one engineer, because we absolutely have to. Everyone else heavy assault. The class system offers the opposite of choice. It says you can pick one of these 6 classes, but you only get to play each class one way, and one way is better than all the others by far. It's silly to think that you are encouraging teamwork by limiting the player's capacity to use teamwork. It's time to take the opposite approach and open the game up. In conclusion, I hope that even if you disagree with the solutions that I've offered, that I've convinced you that there are 2 sides to the metagame issue. Despite being an extremely complicated game, there is ultimately very little depth. It's my personal belief that if Planetside 2 became a truly competitive game, then the players would seek more competitive battles. Everyone wants to know how to give meaning to Planetside 2. How to make it feel like what you or your groups do in the game matters somehow. Making the game to be more competitive answers this question. If every battle was competitive, then those battles would be worth having simply for the sake of having them.